I'm Adam. It's very nice to meet you.
Pleasure. And you are?
Alex.
Alex, Adam and Alex. Okay.
Yes. So we'd like to start by asking how the town of Needham, like what it was like when you first got here. And
They didn't tell you. They didn't tell you. I didn't grow up in Needham. Okay, so I'm not really good if that's what you're looking for, hearing about. Now, I have lived next door in Newton since roughly 1963 or so.
Yeah.
Or, I've lived in the area,
And
but I did not grow up in Needham. I did not go to Needham High School.
that is
So
how
I
long
don't.
did you ever live in Needham?
No, I still live in Newton. I'm here. I'm here because I take classes in the Senior Citizen Center.
So then,
Okay.
can you describe what Newton was like and how it's changed since then?
Sure. Um, um, the the density has changed, although people have worked very hard to keep that from changing. Okay, but in fact, like Needham here, which is on public transportation,
Yeah.
there's finally, at last, state legislation that mandates permitting higher density housing around transport centers. So that's gradually happening in Newton. And I don't see any sign of it happening here yet. But,
Yeah.
um, but it's, I don't know the political situation here. I know the politics in Newton.
So you said that you were like filling in for teaching AP biology in Needham High School.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, like, how was your time there as a teacher in Needham High School?
Um, I really like Needham High School. There were things that would occasionally disturb me.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, they kept doing these shooter exercises,
Yeah.
in which they pull everybody out, and I kept saying to people, "Listen, there isn't going to be a shooter here. This is vastly unlikely, but that's like a fire drill. The building's not going to burn down, okay?
Yeah.
Nor is a shooter going to appear. It's not that it's impossible, but it's extremely unlikely.
Yeah, I agree.
However, we do things. What nobody said to the students was, we do these things even though it's highly unlikely, because we have to know what to do, right? But it would kids would get nervous about it, and I kept saying, relax, it's okay. It's like time off from class.
Yeah. Like, I think adding on to that, like, now some of our teachers have been saying, like, this is probably not going to happen. This is like only just like a practice.
I'm glad.
So yeah.
Probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Astoundingly unlikely. Now,
Definitely.
that doesn't mean, do you read the newspapers? Do you read newspapers?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, here's the newspaper to read. It's called The Guardian. Okay, it's a British newspaper originally, and it's like PBS. It's run by a foundation. It's not owned by a billionaire, which most of the rest of the newspapers are, which is why you want to. Okay, plus they cost a lot of money. The Guardian is free.
Ooh.
Okay, and it's originally a British newspaper from Manchester, England, which is basically where the Industrial Revolution started, and now they have an American edition, so you can get it online.
Oh,
The
nice.
Guardian, okay, and they'll ask you for an email address, and they'll and so you can sign into it. And they will occasionally ask you for money, and it's quite all right to say no, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, because I pay them, right? Because like I'm a rich retired school teacher, right? So I pay them monthly. Okay. One of the reasons I do that is so that people like you can read it for free.
Well,
So you just
thank you so much.
So you just say no, thank you. If it comes up on the screen, but you do have to sign in. You do
Yeah.
have. I mean, after a while they'll kick you off if you don't sign in. But it's no big deal. It's perfectly safe. You can trust them. They're fairly liberal, generally speaking.
Yeah.
But that's what my politics are. So.
All right.
And would you say you've seen any big technological shifts within the
You think?
community? But could you describe how it
Yeah.
felt for you? And maybe also, do you think that's happening again nowadays with the rise of AI?
Um, the AI thing is not clear to me yet. Okay, I mean clearly there's in the in some scientific fields, it's already making a big difference because, for instance, you can you can feed you can feed the DNA sequence for protein, okay, into an AI, and it will tell you the shape of the protein. Okay, now the shape of the protein is what decides how it functions, how it acts biochemically, and also what kind of molecules will stick to it and interfere with its function, which is very important for medicine. Okay, so but yeah, no. I was a very early user. I was actually was a left teaching and became a graduate student back in the early 70s, I guess. And and so that was when computers were first coming in. Okay, so I bought the first generic desktop computer because I couldn't afford to buy an IBM computer, which is what which is the people who started it. Although I did do statistical stuff on a mainframe with
Oh wow.
with
Oh,
cards. Okay, you've heard about the
the
cards,
punch cards,
Yeah,
yeah.
the punch cards. I made punch cards and put them in stacks, put them into the computer. Yeah, yeah, and actually a reader that was connected to the computer. But it was a yeah, it was a old fashioned computer. So they started making the PCs. Okay, and Um, I bought one of the first generic PCs, which was really hilarious, which was so primitive I can't tell you. And and but I was um, doing carpentry on the side, so I was running a small business while I was being a graduate student. So I used that. So I've been using computers since um, DOS. You know about DOS?
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, I was using DOS.
Wow. And on the topic of like small businesses, do you think you've seen an increase or a decrease in the number of small businesses?
We know the answer to that.
But what is your opinion on that?
Um, I think the United States has gradually destroyed small businesses. Okay, concentrated wealth at the very top of the population. Okay, I'm a boomer, so so I got to live through a very prosperous era, but I'm sadly sympathetic to the people out in the Midwest and places like that who are really pissed off because they've been treated really badly, and the opportunities that their parents had
Yeah.
they no longer have, and they unfortunately think that people like Donald Trump will be helpful to them, which is clearly a serious error. But but um, no. Uh, I mean, at the moment, as you can imagine, I'm pretty. I mean, did you learn about the Vietnam War?
Oh yeah.
We did,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I was draft age during the Vietnam War.
Did you go? Did you fight in it, or were you just
I
drafted?
did not, but I actually was opposed to it, which is too bad because I went to college when I was 16 and left when I was 18, and would have been perfectly happy to join the army and learn some kind of technical skill because that's probably what they would have done with me
Yeah.
because I do really well on things like um, like SAT tests and things like that. Okay, like I'm really good at that. So they would have made me a radar technician or a radio. You know what I mean?
Sounds
I mean,
interesting.
there's some chance that they would have put a gun in my hand and made me shoot at people. Sadly, so then I could have traveled. I could have learned an important skill, and then they would have paid for the rest of my college. That would have been nice. Sadly, I thought this was a really crazy thing to do, and so it's funny. What you're getting is I just found an article by Norman Mailer. You know Norman? Article by Norman Mailer in Commentary magazine about this this anti-war demonstration, which I was at, in which we surrounded the Pentagon. Okay, and where I got mildly tear gassed and almost got my head beaten in by a U.S. Marshal. Okay, he wrote a book about it, which I just reminded my children about, and my daughter said, "Well, maybe we should read that not for our book club." It's called Armies of the Night, but he wasn't where I was, so I was I was a student at Brandeis part of that time, and I was very active in the anti-war movement and did teach-ins and stuff like that. Okay, and and uh, and um, and was involved some in the civil rights movement. There's a famous there was something called the Poor People's Campaign, which was about 50 some odd years ago. It was the 50th anniversary 2 or 3 years ago, I think. Okay, like a couple of years after King was assassinated, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference finally organized this thing that King had talked about called the Poor People's Campaign. And so I went down with a friend down to Washington. There was an encampment in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and like I lived in a plywood shack, and did and we demonstrated all over Washington, you know, and and I when I was about to get arrested for disrupting traffic, my friend grabbed me by the arm and said, "We have to get back, or classes will start without us. You can't be in jail." Okay. Now, apparently, I think I have the sequence. It's so many years ago. I think I have the time sequence slightly wrong, but that's. And I met all kinds of people who were later very famous civil rights people because they were young men, almost all men, young men who were helping the Southern Christian Leadership Conference organize this thing, which was called Resurrection City. So you can look that up in Wikipedia. Okay, so I keep telling young people, okay, and I know I'm like keeping not letting you ask you questions. Keep telling young people if they think things are really awful now, they're right. Things are really awful, but it's if you've been paying attention long enough, it's always kind of awful, and really awful stuff happens periodically, and so one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was so here I was. I remembered the McCarthy hearings as recent history. I was too little to really get it, although my parents were watching it and stuff. So I think I was exposed to it, but it was recent history as I became like an adolescent, and the Vietnam War, and the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, somebody who grew up in my neighborhood was one of those three kids who was killed in Mississippi and buried. Um, so things were really terrible. And then and I ended up not getting drafted, mostly because he didn't explain it to me at the time, but a sympathetic draftee doctor, I said something to him, okay, and he found something in my medical record because I'd gone back. I had a knee injury, which same knee I injured this year actually, um, and uh, And there was an induction center in New York City on, wait, I just heard, and it was mentioned, it was something street. Now I forget. This place, you went there, and I got let off for 6 months. They told me to come back. But you went down there, and because I was born in New York City, therefore I had to go for my induction back to New York City. And if you closed your eyes, you could imagine doughboys from World War One walking around in their boxer shorts. You know, it was really old, and it had been around for a long time. Okay, certainly World War One. I don't think that was inaccurate. And and there was a group, an anti-war group called the Weathermen, which is they call themselves that after a Bob Dylan song, which says, "You don't need the weather. You don't need the weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing." Okay, so they call themselves the Weathermen, and they blew this building up in the middle of the night, killing no one. Okay, so the army moved it to a fort, an army fort in Brooklyn. So I said to the doc, I said, "Doc, you should be so grateful to the weatherman. That other place was so horrible, and they blew it up for you, and here you are in this nice place." So we went flip, 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 gave me a piece of paper, sent me on my way. Turns out, gave me a 4F, which I later figured out he had a possible legitimate excuse to do that. Okay, um, but nothing serious, you know.
Wait, what is a 4F?
Oh,
Like those
oh,
the
oh! 4F meant you were free from the draft.
oh,
You were unfit to be drafted. Whereas what I expected them to do was tell me to come back again in 6 months after my knee gotten better,
yeah.
and then I would have to worry about what I would do. And I don't know. I don't. I have a cousin who moved to Canada. Okay.
Right. Um. So this isn't like really related to Needham, but like, do you have any people who like really shaped who you are today, and like any mentors, like family, or like even teachers, like that have like that gave you some advice that really stuck with you?
Well, um, well, I think my parents were very influential. Also, my older brother, who's just recently retired as a professor of medicine. Okay, he's older than me.
Mm.
Okay, so like he's now in his 80s. Okay,
Wow.
I don't think he retired until he turned 80. Okay, um, he um, he went to college before me and came back and had read all these stuff that was very hip at the time, existentialists, stuff like that. And and he my family's Jewish, okay, sort of, okay, and and he came back and asked my parents if they believed any of this, and they said, hmm, not really. Turned out the whole family were atheists. Okay,
Oh wow.
okay, my whole family now are all atheists. Yes, they're from various ancestry, but that happens a lot to people who have scientific background
Yeah.
because you go, um, this is beautiful literature, you know, and you know, I worked at McLean Hospital. I worked with people who were hearing voices in their heads, you know, but we would give them medicine for it, not write it down and turn it into scripture. So so I used to get into trouble in the high schools
Yeah.
because I really um, people don't want you to really teach kids how to think scientifically because if they do, then they stop believing a lot of stuff that people want them to believe in.
Mm.
Okay, because they say it's like the shooter scenario at Needham High School. It's not that it's impossible,
Mm-hmm.
but it's extremely unlikely.
Yeah.
And you know, they teach you this nonsense about like the scientific method, you know. It's really. It's not really, it's like middle school stuff. It's
Yeah.
not really right. Okay. But what I did like to teach people was, what do I mean when I say something is true?
Hmm.
And what I would explain to them was that that meant that I had no evidence to the contrary, or something, or if I say something is untrue, okay, which is maybe more salient to what I was just talking about, that if I have no evidence, okay, of an objective nature, at a certain point, I am entitled to say, this is false. This is untrue. Now, what that means is, that means that it is highly unlikely to be true. So I would teach kids, I would say, when I say something is true, this is what I mean. Say, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. This is highly likely to be true. But I'm open to changing my mind
Hmm.
if there's contrary evidence. Okay? That's the way you think in science.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the stuff that I've taught people over the years turns out to not be untrue, but not really a, a good explanation of what's true, because we've learned a lot more.
Yeah.
And so the stuff about, you know, I mean, I wouldn't argue with people about religion, for instance, because among other things, religions at least have an ethical system associated with them, right? So it's not a good subject. But I would talk to them about why people thought that there were people were being kidnapped by Martians, by
Hmm.
aliens and stuff,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I would explain to them why people were really having horrifying experiences,
Hmm.
but that it had nothing to do with space aliens.
Yeah.
Okay, that there was no evidence that that was the case. Okay.
All right.
I think we'll do maybe one last question.
Yes, that's good because I have a class at one.
All right.
So, um, what do you think our generation misunderstands about your generation, and vice versa?
I don't know about your generation. The generation in between apparently is really ticked off at the boomers. Okay, and I'm just barely a boomer.
Yeah.
Okay, I went to school at first. Since I went to school so young, some of the people I went to started school with are not really boomers, were born during World War II. And the people who were born after World War II, they had a very different experience. So that's really me. I'm like very beginning of the boomer generation. And they think that we somehow took all these opportunities away from them because, in fact, the economy was expanding, things were good. I own a house in Newton. I'm a retired school teacher. I own a house in Newton that's probably worth $1 million, and it cost me 30,000. Okay, and the younger people, including some older members of your generation, are really resentful about the fact that their economic opportunities are limited in certain fundamental ways that they weren't for us. Now, granted, I'm like a detectably white person, you know, right? So like there are plenty of people who are getting really screwed all that time. But I was a member of a privileged class. And so they think that it's our fault. And in fact, what the it's a political problem, and it's not like we did it to them personally, you know.
Yeah.
So that's there's a lot of that. I mean, the hey boomer, that kind of stuff. It's just a load of hooey. What it is it's the usual error, which is that people are reacting personally to something that's a societal problem.
Yeah. I definitely like seen like people like kind of like complain instead of like thinking about like what is that actual reason. So yeah.
Yeah. So instead, they like to blame people. So they
Yeah.
blame us. They say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you bought all the houses. You had economic opportunities. Now you won't move out of your houses. We can't afford
Yeah.
to buy a house. We can't get this and this and this." And it's hardly very bad around here. I mean, the housing situation is bad around here, but there's parts of the Midwest and the
Yeah.
South and stuff that are just the pits. That are
Yeah. I heard
just
like there's some like you can get a really nice house in Texas for like less than $300,000.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the main thing. And so But that's always a problem. People take societal problems very personally, and they blame the people. I know, it's, trust me, it's not me. However, if there's some billionaires you'd like to blame, feel free. I think that's quite accurate. That's quite accurate.
Yeah.
But the fact that they own the newspapers doesn't really give you much of an opportunity to think that way. And it's much easier for people to say, "Oh, it's those damn immigrants." Okay? It's those damn immigrants, or it's the Jews, or it's the Muslims, or it's the, who knows what, it's the black
Yeah.
people, whatever. This is like a classic fascist technique, which is that you tell people that it's these other people who are their enemies. Okay? Yeah, you got to stop.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Thanks
for
for taking
coming
the
us.
time.
Yeah, thank you.
I figured I could amuse you,
All right.
with some. Don't forget the Guardian.
Yep.
Go check it out.
All right.
Okay.